விண்ணாளும் தேவர்க்கும் மேலாய வேதியனை மண்ணாளும் மன்னவர்க்கும் மாண்பாகி நின்றானை தன்னார் தமிழளிக்கும் தன்பாண்டி நாட்டானை பெண்ணாளும் பாகனை பேணு பெருந்துறையில் கண்ணார் கடல்காட்டி நாயேனை ஆட்கொண்ட அண்ணாமலையானை பாடுதுங்கா நம்மானாய் சித்தம் தெளிவீர்கள் அத்தன் ஆரூரை பத்தி மலர்த்தூவ முத்தியாகுமே. A very good afternoon to one and all. Initially, a couple of months back, when Sri T.K. Parthasarathy Swami called me up to know if I would be interested in participating. In fact, he said Swamiji insisted that I participate, and I had a genuine doubt as to how authentic it would be to invite me for a conference on Ramanuja. But given the fact that inclusivity of Ramanuja is the core of the conference, and several papers on Ramanuja's initiatives to make Sri Vaishnava Sampradayam extremely inclusive, then I thought it really makes sense for me to be a part of it, being a Shaiva Siddhanta teacher in Thirumuram Adinam and the Asthana Vidwan of Thirumuram Adinam, to be invited here in this conference. And in fact, the initially suggested topic was Sri Ramanuja's take on Shaiva Siddhanta as seen from his Vedanta works. But considering the fact that it might invite more discussions / debates post-conference, and I'm as such facing many from my previous presentations, I thought let me make it more inclusive. So I should say that I have chosen to bring out or rather represent a paper that I authored half a decade back as a part of the celebrations of 1000th year celebrations of Ramanujacharya. The one who coordinated is there right in the first seat, Dr. Radha Madam. So I've just made some changes in the presentation that was made 6 years back and representing it. Thank you, Swamiji, for being more inclusive than even Ramanujacharya to invite me here to present a paper titled Rise, Growth and Development of Ramanuja as a Social Movement, particularly post-Ramanuja's period. The galaxy of Alvars, canonized Vishnu devotees who sung in praise in Tamil, ranges across a wide spectrum of the society. The hagiographical accounts claim that the first three of them, Poigai, Bhoodam and Pei, do not belong to any communities as they were not born through physical reproduction, or probably the origin of these three devotees was not legible when the accounts were authored. Starting from the fourth of the Alvar, Thirumurthy or Bhaktisara, we have representations from various communities cutting across the social pyramid. Acharyas immediately before Sri Ramanuja, the trend of including representative members from socially downtrodden communities seemed to have mellowed down after the periods of the Alvar saints. The lineage of Acharyas starts with Nathamunigal and goes on till Periyanambigal before Ramanuja's taking charge. The reason is generally attributed to the fact that it was during this time that a structured system was being formulated to introduce the philosophy of bhakti as propagated by the Alvars into the mainstream social system. Compilation of the songs authored by the Alvars into Divya Prabandham seemed to have been the first step in bringing out a syllabus to bhakti movement that saw wide-scale acceptance. Amongst the Acharyas who preceded Ramanuja, the role played by Sri Ramanujacharya is noteworthy. According to the Guru Parampara Prabhavam, we get to know that he had an illustrious journey from being a political administrator to taking up the responsibilities of fostering the ideologies as shown by the Alvars and as postulated by Sriman Nathamunigal. It is quite unfortunate that a major chunk of his writings were lost to the lore of time, and the few we get are mostly limited to works of praise on Vishnu and his consort. We get minimum references to his philosophical writings like Siddhitrayam, and they do not really shed much light on his views on the society as a whole. Having been an administrator, we see him accommodating students from a wide section of the society too. While some of his popular students include Periyanambigal, Thirukkotiyur Nambigal, Thirumalai Andan, etc., we also see him tutor people like Thirukkachi Nambigal and Maraner Nambigal, who clearly belong to the non-Brahminical communities of the society. Moreover, the hagiographies tell us that the role played by the latter have been more illustrious than of the former when it comes to exhibiting qualities of a Sri Vaishnavite. The episode involving Maraneri Nambi's relationship with Yamunacharya and that of Periyanambi performing his final rites brings to light two important tenets. First, the mindset that had developed by then to accept one's teacher at par with the Almighty, and the second is that of a Sri Vaishnavite society by and large was still not open to social changes. Moreover, the same episode also tells us that the alienation of Periyanambigal and his family for breach of social code of conduct by the people of Srirangam. This has been the typical societal setup that Periyanambi is probably the first to have attempted to have addressed a change. It was under this situation that Ramanuja enters the scenario. It is well established fact that Ramanujacharya started his schooling under Yadava Prakasha, an Advaitic philosopher. By his non-acceptance of the preceptor's teaching at such a young age probably is the first protest by Ramanuja. At an intellectual level, not accepting the philosophical interpretations delivered by Yadava Prakasha, and more importantly, delivering a set of alternative interpretations to the same marks a change in the course of social history in the coming years. Moreover, we see that once his popularity swells up, a host of students seem to have get them affiliated under him. Special mention has got to be made about disciples like Alvan of Kuram, a local chieftain as described in the Guru Parampara Prabhavam, and his own family members like Andan and Embar, and his former teacher Yadava Prakasha, to name a few. We see that the members belonging to a wide range of societal spectrum have accepted his leadership even at a very nascent stage of his spiritual career. A key to his success in accumulating followers starts right here by accepting and accommodating people from a varied social background. Another important factor to be considered is Alvan's acknowledgement of women as an equally and capable denomination of the society to endure spiritual, religious and philosophical pursuits. Except for the role played by Andal and Kumudavalli Tayar in the case of Thirumangai Alvar, we fall short of examples of women devotees during the pre-Ramanuja era of the Sri Vaishnavite timeline. Once he took charge of the responsibility, traditional accounts recall him marching down the streets of Srirangam, followed by a huge gathering that included countless number of women disciples too. A gender-balanced approach in the spiritual field made his religion more social and blend it well within an individual's self. Example like those of Parathikollayammal or Kongil Pirati only show us his concern in accommodating more people beyond boundaries and thereby propagating the philosophy and establishing the religion. Through the episodes in the lives of Tiruppan Alvar, Maraneri Nambi, etc., we understand the kind of situation that was prevailing in places like Srirangam. Tanjamamba, Ramanuja's wife's reaction to Thirukkachi Nambigal and her argument with Periyanambigal's wife gives us more clues about the societal grammar that was in use by the large section of the common public. It was in such a situation that Ramanuja established a new social order and strengthened the lives of a set of non-Brahminical Sri Vaishnavites called the Satada Sri Vaishnavas. There are two popular accounts put forward for the formulation of this community. One describes them to be an already existing non-Brahminical community that was promoted into temple services with exclusive rights by Ramanuja. The other theory put forward is that, accepting the advice of Ramanujacharya, a few families gave up their Brahminical affiliations and took up the task of servicing the deity more intimately. I personally feel the second theory put forward stands weak when it comes to breaking of traditions, which Ramanuja never did. Though historically we are yet to prove the exact period of origin of such a sect, it is as clear as crystal that it was during the times of Ramanuja that they got established as a sect that is engaged in divine service of the deities in temples and were physically made to stand almost at par with the designated priests and their assistants. The social stand of people belonging to this community is quite clear, at least in places like Srirangam, Alvar Tirunagari and Srivilliputturu. All of this is pertaining to the Satada Sri Vaishnava community. These traditions and practices are governed by the same code of conduct followed by the Brahminical counterparts. They only restrain from performing the sacred ceremony and hence do not engage in practicing rituals like Sandhya Vandana and other Agnikaryas bestowed upon Brahmins exclusively. But for that, their role in the conduct of the temple, daily activities in the temples and the festivals celebrated are considerably prominent. The members of this community still are associated with designated Acharyas, get their initiation or the Panchasamskara at the prescribed age and adhere to the community principles. They are engaged in various temple activities on a daily basis and share the responsibilities within their community. Apart from maintaining gardens and making flower garlands, in some cases they are put in charge of the treasury of the temple and includes the jewellery that is used to adorn the deities. This shows their social promotion and a strong hold that they have had as early as the 11th century of the Common Era. Though there are many reasons to appreciate Ramanuja's managerial strategies, the first and foremost is how he articulated the workforce engaged in running the Srirangam temple. Certainly by the 11th century, the Srirangam temple has gotten established as a major center of pilgrimage and more importantly, the religious capital of Sri Vaishnava Sampradayam. The fact that the temple enjoyed patronage from the medieval Chola kings is evident from the enormous donations recorded in the inscriptions around the temple complex. At such a stage, it is only possible that the temple was also a social icon and as a factor in development of the temple and its surrounding. We can see a rise in the importance that Srirangam had earned by that time, which was followed by an increase in the population of the town. To run an accommodative show in the temple, Ramanuja did make some corrections in the administrative and managerial sections of the workforce. He ensured that the right over the temple overall administration is earned first from Amudanar, the ex-chief administrative officer of the temple. His background otherwise is unfortunately not recorded in the religious hagiographies. Once the temple administration was earned, Ramanuja went on to set right the workforce and frames a hierarchy that is again very accommodative. He splits the workforce into 10 groups or kutams. A detailed note about them. The first in the list is Tiruppadiyar. They are predominantly the migrated population from various towns and cities who have accepted Ramanuja's spiritual and religious teachings and have settled in Srirangam. Then you have the Tiruppani Saivar, the hereditary group of water bearers chosen from the descendants of spiritual masters. Their duty included cleaning places of worship, splashing water on the routes of the procession, etc. Nambi, that is the traditional title given to the official temple priests of the Srirangam temple, Bhagavata Nambimar, as they are recorded in the inscriptions too. The Ullurar, the native population of Srirangam, who have accepted the leadership of Ramanuja and hence found in the designation as important as guarding the jewelry, silk, sacred vessels of the temple, etc. Then you have the Vinnappam Saivar, the musicians or the people who sing the hymns, or the Arayars, as they were just introduced by Sri T.K. Pathasarathi Swami. Then you have the Tirukarahakkayar. They are the members of the designation, had to fetch water from the sacred river Kollidam or Tenthirukaveri, as the Sri Vaishnavites refer to it. Then you have the Sthanattar. They are the official palanquin bearers to carry the deity during the journey and the processions. Then you have the Bhattal, the Vedic scholars whose duty include chanting selected portions of the Vedas and other sacred texts when the priests conduct the rituals. Then you have the Arya Bhattal, a migration from the north, as the security officers of the main access points and entryways inside and outside the temple. The 10th in list are the Dasanambis, the traditional gardeners of the temple who proclaimed as the Sata the Sri Vaishnavas by Sri Ramanuja, who were promoted to take part in the temple rituals apart from their regular activities. Now it is interesting to note that the system which was framed by Ramanuja is still in vogue in Srirangam, accommodated people from various sects and communities. Apart from the coexistence of Brahmins and non-Brahmins, there are also provisions to add people from warrior communities within the framework, and the most popular one is Pillai Urangavalli Dasar. It is also traditionally believed that another protocol of similar style existed in the temple that comprised of tailors, cowherds, goldsmiths, stonesmiths, carpenters, painters, potters and even boatmen to ferry people in and outside of the island. They all had a designation and hence an official association with the temple, and a very, very sentimental one with the deity also. Moreover, Ramanuja also had positioned the migrants in the task force and given them duties so that in the long run their identities as non-natives of Srirangam shall be removed, and that they can also facilitate more people accepting the religion with the security of social identity. Srirangam thus became a widely accepted destination for the followers of Ramanuja, and it also guaranteed a healthy social life and acceptance to the migrants. The population of Srirangam started accepting Ramanuja as an ultimate icon for their religious upliftment. In a few years, his strategies enabled the formulation and activation of a well-structured administrative system within the temple and a widely accommodative social system within the town. Ramanuja became the center of focus and thus hailed by his followers alike. We see his interactions with the local public, representatives of the ruling classes, and philosophers of opposing faith. A typical example would be his way of handling Yajnamurthy, an Advaitist scholar in a debate who turned an ardent disciple of Ramanuja and in fact was titled from then on as Arulala Perumal Emberumanar. Thus, acceptance from varied class of people clearly expanded the social status of Ramanuja as a religious leader and developed him into a movemental icon. He set foot on a mission to propagate the sectarian faith beyond geographical boundaries. Traditional accounts detail two of his travelogues in a detailed fashion. The first one is to pay a ceremonial visit to Vishnu temples across India, sanctified especially by the Alvar saints. The Guru Parampara Prabhavam allots certain sections of the hagiography to help us draw the travel plan and route supposedly used by Ramanuja. All through, the travel is punctuated with significant meetings with fellow scholars, preaching the religions to common public, addressing the local ruler and bringing him into the Sri Vaishnava fold, and thereby establishing the religion as a regionally accepted one. In certain cases, we see his attempts to change the worship system prevailing in established pilgrimage centers like Thiruvananthapuram and Puri Jagannatham, where he of course failed, and places like Sri Kurmam, where he was successful. In many of the temple towns he visited in the northern parts of India and organized philosophical debates with the local scholars seems like a compulsory program in his schedule. Through these extensive planned travel, Ramanuja certainly managed to propagate the religion pan-India so much that nobody before or after him ventured. The second most important travel in his journey to the Hoysala kingdom that was active in the southern parts of today's Karnataka. The political stir that led to this travel is described to be that of certain Kirimikanta Cholan, generally identified with Kulothunga II by popular historian, as opposed to his views on the supremacy of Shiva over Vishnu. On a more specific note, a possibility of this disagreement for having caused as a result of Ramanuja making bold changes in the existing social order cannot be overlooked. However, this journey caused certain massive socio-political changes in the Hoysala kingdom too. Jainism was a popular prevailing religion in that part of the Hoysala country when Ramanuja arrived. During his initial days of travel, Ramanuja's destinations were villages in the countryside like Mithilapuri Shalagramam, where the local population did not entertain an ascetic and his followers. In fact, it is said that they were hostile in certain cases. Ramanuja managed to convince them and with divine intervention bring them into his fold. Mass acceptance of local population is recorded in the Guru Parampara Prabhavam. The highlight event is that of the sequence is the acceptance of Ramanuja's leadership by none less than the king Bhittudeva himself. He accepts the faith and gets to call himself Vishnu Vardhana. The establishment of a major religious capital at Melkote Tirunarayanapuram and a series of other towns including Ghadak, Belur, Nagamangala, Talakkad, Tondanur to name a few, happens with the support of the king himself. Ramanuja continues to be a living social legacy in these towns even after a millennium now. After having framed a code of conduct to be followed by his disciples, Ramanuja established a network of torchbearers who could carry forward the tradition and transfer it to the following generations. He chose and established 74 Simhasanatipattis, literally the throne heirs, from among his students. He ensured that the chosen person proved provocative academic qualifications, appreciable personality, proved their excellence in leadership qualities primarily. More interestingly, these torchbearers were chosen from a wide range of geographical locations too. Having toured extensively around India, Ramanuja was well introduced in almost all primary pilgrimages towns of the country. In some places, the debates that he attended had already brought a considerable number of followers too. Though these torchbearers majorly settled in Vaishnavite centers in today's Tamil Nadu, their representation is from various towns of Andhra Pradesh, Telangana and parts of South Karnataka too. Ramanuja did face hostile situations from the local population, especially the opposition shown by the priest of Thiruvananthapuram seem to have been lasting impact that till date Ramanuja's Vaishnavam as propounded has not been able to enter the state of Kerala as much as it has managed in the other states. Though the state has a good number of temples and temple towns eulogized by the hymns of Alvars, the Malainattu Divya Desangal as they are called, the state being the birthplace of Kulashekara, one of the Alvars himself, Ramanuja could not move a brick in the favor, and that system prevails till date. This is now a potential topic for another research on sociological perspective. Ramanuja has successfully travelled the entire state of today's Andhra Pradesh and Telangana and has established very many centers too. Towns like Ahobilam, Tirumala Tirupati have received the attention of Ramanuja and gained importance in the coming days. He has definitely created a social restructuring and had made divinity affordable among the masses. As the popularity and fame increased exponentially, Ramanuja established these Simhasanadipatis in various towns. Their duties can be classified into two. The primary duty includes taking charge of the administration and working of the local temple. These temples mostly come under the classification of Divya Desams, having been sung by the Alvars. In some cases, these temples are also those popularized by Ramanuja exclusively, like Tirunarayanapuram. However, the representative took active part in running the temple and also in conducting the temple rituals. Their second important duty was to spread the faith among the common public, bring them under the Sri Vaishnava fold and establish a personal relationship with a guide-student relationship that will go on for generations to come. We should say that this strategy of Ramanuja has been very successfully implemented. The success can be seen in the continuing relationship at a very personal level that most of the Sri Vaishnavites have with their respective guru, who is one of the descendant of the 74 Simhasanadipatis selected and authorized by Ramanuja himself. In some cases, they are sought for approval of personal choices like wedding, matchmaking, travel abroad plans, etc. In most cases, they are the first invitees and guest of honors in family celebrations. Their financial needs at times are supported by the disciples affiliated to that guru and so on. Though the personal touch of Ramanuja is not there, the representative system conveniently passes on generations after generation and manages to create a standing bond that people today have a sense of belongingness with none less than Sri Ramanuja himself through these acharyas. Ramanuja's early life is incomplete without explaining the speciality of his students, in particularly the relationship that each of them exhibited with Ramanuja. Though the initial intent to accept the relationship of Ramanuja is the religious guidance that he promised to provide, in a short span of time, the respect that he had served with turns into a state of devotion, which strengthens with time, and at a stage of complete focus on Almighty turns in fact towards Ramanuja. Some of works authored on Ramanuja stands a clear proof to the above statement. The magnum opus ever written on him is the set of 108 songs composed by Thiruvarangath Amudanar, the ex-administrator of Srirangam temple. Every song, deep in meaning, brings out the guilt that the author faces thinking about his life before meeting Ramanuja. He curses himself for his lifestyle in his earlier days and feels joyous for having taken refuge in Ramanuja. Disciples like Tondanur Nambi are a critical example. He goes to give up his devotion for Narayana and he considers his guru far more superior. He worships Ramanuja and believes that serving him alone will fetch him salvation. This ideology seems to have taken base at a more common connotation, though more such episodes and becomes established with Ramanuja holds the key for salvation, as he is called Sri Vaikunta Marga Adipati. He is respected for his costless mercy with which he will approach us, irrespective of our thoughts for him, present himself, enlighten us and make us his disciple. This seems to be accepted philosophy by the time Ramanuja reaches Srirangam after his stay at Melkote. The episode in his life that involves his ordeals with the Chola king and his escape to Hoysala country certainly shows the disapproval of the changes implemented by Ramanuja in the then existing social scenario. Considering the available historic data, the rise of Ramanuja as a messiah within the Vaishnavite sect and as a social reformer across the society can be looked upon as a reason which the ruling class foresaw for a possible social upheaval. The exponential growth of Ramanuja as a movement independent of the political background should have threatened the ruling class, and hence they commissioned him to the court. But the reason portrayed by the Guru Parampara Prabhavam and other similar traditional accounts that the king's commissioning Ramanuja to the court was more to settle his vengeance against the Vaishnavite school and paints a picture like it was a sectarian fate. In reality, the Chola king in discussion, Kulotunga II, and his predecessors over generations have been staunch believers in the school of Shaivam, but their patronage and donation in large scale to Vishnu temples across and beyond Tamil Nadu cannot be overlooked. Even in this case, the vengeance acquired by the particular king seems more like on Ramanuja and his activities than on Vishnu as a god or on Sri Vaishnavam as a religious school. However, Ramanuja escapes the trouble by shifting over to the Hoysala country, where he wins over the heart of the king and establishes the religion quite popularly, built several temples that developed into temple towns, chose leaders to take forward the religion after him that ensures that the religion roots itself strongly in the Karnataka Desha. Picturesque accounts about the final days of Ramanuja are accounted in the hagiographies that were authored on him. He seemed to have authored texts primarily in Sanskrit, elaborating the philosophical meanings of the Visishtadvaita school of thought. A detailed commentary on Bhagavad Gita, simplified texts on Visishtadvaita philosophy like the Vedartha Sangraha and Sara, a book discussing the code of conduct, the Nitya Grantham, and everyday activities for a Sri Vaishnavite. He further arranges for commentaries on the works of Alvars to be done by his disciples, the first one being Thirukkurhepran Pillan, who authored the Arayirappadi, the first commentary on Thiruvaimozhi, and chanting of the hymns made mandatory to all his followers, reinforces the usage of Tamil hymns in the temple rituals and at residences of Sri Vaishnavites. He advises religious and social messages to his disciples and nominates them in public to carry forward his teachings and propagandize the faith more. The emotionally rich moments of Ramanuja's funeral and final rites give us a clue to understand the super exemplified position that he had reached in his lifetime. Certainly an iconic status that none of his preceptors before him had. After Ramanuja, we see that Srirangam managed to be the central point of focus, and the leadership shifts over to Embar, Parashara Bhattar, and so on. More works, both in Sanskrit and Tamil, are authored during this period. Especially the task of writing commentaries on the Alvar's hymns picks up, and some of the religious leaders turn out to be popular commentators themselves. Another remarkable growth is the splitting of the monocentric system into two, or as the Vaishnavite terminology goes, the school splits into two as the Sri Bhashya Guru Paramparai and Bhagavad Vishaya Guru Paramparai. While those belonging to the former consider themselves to be the authority on Sri Bhashya, the text authored by Ramanuja as a commentary on the Bodhayana Vritti, those of the latter claim their credentials to excellence in commentaries of the Tamil works of Alvar, especially Thiruvaimozhi of Nammalvar. These schools develop into their own lineage of teachers, of course, both claiming affiliation to Ramanuja and his predecessors. Clearly, the split seemed to start post-Ramanuja's period and hence earns us space to postulate a difference that existed even during the times of Ramanuja but failed to surface, being controlled by the leadership. In some places, these differences are clearly recorded in commentaries authored by the members of the respective schools too. These differences did sow the seed for the split of Ramanuja's school into the popularly called Vadakalai and the Tenkalai, as they are called today. The period between the 13th and the 14th century saw some major socio-political changes that involved invasions, the Islamic invasions I am mentioning here, from the northern provinces that shook the very monumental roots of the south. The invaders plundered temple towns, looted temples, and this disturbance shook the religious and philosophical network that existed within the temples as center of focus. People migrated in large numbers to places far from the core Tamil country. Some of the religious leaders themselves shifted their base to towns in Andhra and found solace with the existing regional representatives of the Ramanuja school. Thereby, Sri Vaishnavam spread even more within the Telugu-speaking population. Still, it is surprising to see how the network managed to reinstate itself, of course with major changes, and continue the tradition from where it stopped. After the invasion, with the rise of Vijayanagara Empire, the fallen socio-political system and religious traditions were resurrected, and temples once again became the center for social activities of the society. Huge temple complexes that were deserted once again started buzzing with activities, and it is believed that the system as codified Ramanuja was reinstalled in these temples. The role played by Manavala Mamunikal, a popular Sri Vaishnava preceptor of the late 14th century, is to be credited for the reinstatement of Ramanuja's traditions in the temples. New works eulogizing Ramanuja like Arti Prabandham, Yatiraja Vimshati are authored, and these keep the sentimental attachment towards Ramanuja and his ultimate leadership glowing. The Vijayanagara rulers, apart from being able political administrators, were also deeply religious and great connoisseurs of arts. They developed these temples architecturally and ensured conduct of rituals and festivals regularly. Some of them seem to have developed a personal affirmation towards some popular temples like Srirangam, Tirumala, Madurai, etc., and have contributed in huge sums as donations and philanthropy. Needless to say, arguments and fights involving philosophical differences have been actively going on at an intellectual level, but that was at their initial stage. As it intensified, it involved differences in practices, social life, and more. These fights sometimes have been taken up with the local administrators now and then. However, none of these debates or arguments saw any side claiming their non-affiliation or hostility towards Ramanuja or his philosophy. The difference seemed to have evolved from the differences in interpretation of Ramanuja's works, and the fight was more after the claim for authenticity. It is to be noted here that even after the development of such heated situations, Ramanuja as a character withstood the test and continued to be the ultimate icon of Sri Vaishnava sect. Accommodation of people from various classes and long travels like Ramanuja made created an impact in other parts of the country too. Budding religious leaders and philosophers took his lesson as an inspiration of himself as a role model. These seers adopted his teachings with changes to suit their own philosophies, of course. Many such schools developed, especially in the parts of North India, the Ramananda school or the Swaminarayana school or even the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's traditions. These schools have flourished and are growing with more popularity today. In conclusion, Ramanuja seemed to have been an unparalleled characterization in his times. His leadership qualities, exhibiting both compassion and accommodativeness, coupled with cutting-edge and stern nature, made his position strong as a social representative of the Sri Vaishnava community, more than a philosopher of the time. His empathy earned a movement status so strong that time and again his direct disciples gave upon even Sriman Narayana, the form that Ramanuja himself portrayed as the final solace, to seek refuge in him. The songs authored during his time and post his period also throws lights on the condition that he was enjoying as the ultimate leader of the Sri Vaishnavas. The social restructuring that he proposed was definitely a success among the common public, though it earned him the wrath of the ruling class. His management strategies, planning principles, and techniques during crisis situations made him a role model for his successors and hence groomed him as the single identity of the Sri Vaishnava community. Whatever differences in philosophy trickled post Ramanuja, the groups have always been strong in projecting their principles and eternally remain as Ramanujadasas. Temple administration, even post-invasion, went on to rejuvenate the system as established by Ramanuja only. More than his own times, the period between the 13th to the 17th century saw mass movement eulogizing Ramanuja by Sri Vaishnava leaders like Sri Vedanta Desika, Manavala Mamunigal, and a host of seers who followed. It was more during this time that Ramanuja is promoted into a movement form and worshipping him becomes even more popular. All schools of Sri Vaishnavam and their branches get themselves acknowledged by the inclusion of Ramanuja in the lineage of teachers. Furthermore, installation of Ramanuja's idols in all temples, small and big, becomes a mandate and celebrating festivals for him become popular. More communities, classified as non-Brahmin Sri Vaishnavas, take Ramanuja as their central theme in their religious and spiritual activities. The concepts of Ramanuja Kutams with facilities built for travelers in pilgrimages where they can stay and eat also becomes a common factor during these times. Ramanuja Dhasa, literally a servant of Ramanuja, is a general term with which any Sri Vaishnavite, Brahmin or not, introduces himself to a fellow Sri Vaishnavite. Thus, the status of Ramanuja as the emblem of Vaishnavism in general and Sri Vaishnavam in particular has grown during his times through the conduct of his personality, nourished by his followers through their religious and emotional commitment with him, groomed by preachers who succeeded him, and rose to a level of worshipful movement by the common masses as we see it today. Thank you.
As you say, there are so many pramanas are there in our Shastras. Here I would like to start with this comment on these three papers. There is another saying called Shatam Vihaya Bhoktavyam. It means we have to leave when the time comes. Already we are late by 40 minutes. So, just I will take each and every paper 1 minute or 1.5 minutes like that. Fortunately, this is the fifth plenary session. You know the fifth Sankhya, as again the Vedanteshika quotes in his Aitira Saptati 12th sloka, Vavrde Panchabi Ayudai Murare. Vavrde Panchabi Ayudai Murare. This is the 12th sloka of Aitira Saptati. So, whenever that Lord takes some incarnation, even though he got so many weapons, but 5 things will always come with him. Vavrde Panchabi Ayudai Murare. This is the fifth session. And overall, as mentioned by Dr. Radha Gunadhan in her that is a chairperson speech, about 9 gems. Fortunately, besides these 2 sessions, we have 2 more sessions, and Upakrama and Upasamhara, when you join it comes 9. 7 sessions plus Upakrama is there already we had, and Upasamhara we are going to have. If you add 7 plus 2, 9. So this is 9 also is very one of the beautiful number. So now we are in the middle. So and then fortunately, as mentioned in my paper, the 3 pramanas and 3 tattvas. So there were 3 people who produced the paper. One is by that is a young and energetic scholar, Bentley Nayakar. Actually his name is, when you observe him, Bentley Nathamuni is there. So he changed his name as Nathamuni. So I met him, that young scholar, on again ICPR has given me charge to conduct one seminar in Madras University on from 6th January to 12th January on the great work of Vedanteshika Satyamurthy Kalapa. That young scholar came and was there throughout that period. So I asked him, then he said, I am from South Africa. So, Kadal Kadande nammudi Siddhantalam poyirudhu innikilla panduduttu. So that I would like to say, again 3 R, that is Ramanuja, Reformer and Religion. Ramanuja, Reformer and Religion. The 3 R are there. So that was very beautifully presented by that young scholar Bentley. He started indirectly mentioning Padukas was one of the sloka. Nissesham Ambaratalam, there is a sloka is there. So Vedanteshika says how we can start like that. So in keeping that, he has presented in such a way that is Ramanuja saint who reformed religion. And again one more Nyaya is there in Sanskrit, Madhyamani Nyayena. So beginning and young, 2 young scholars and well protected by the Madhyamani Naya, that is another than our T.K. Parsardi. So he has taken the chapter of Arayar, that is very, very nice. So, சிலதெல்லாம் வந்து கண்ணால் பார்க்கணும் இல்லையா, கேட்கறது வேற, பார்க்கணும் இல்லையா. ஸோ அரையர் பார்த்தா தான் நமக்கு அணுக முடியும். ஸோ தட் வாஸ் அ பியூட்டிஃபுல் டாபிக் டேக்கன் பை அரையர் சேவை. That is T.K. Parsardi. I know him more than a decade and always he used to speak with me with the polite and all, very short and sweet. So that paper also very nice. And Madhura, again one more sentence is there. Madhurena samapayet. We had complete with Madhura. That is very, very fast. About 10 pages. Dasavatar மாதிரி ஒரு கிட்டத்தட்ட வாசிக்கிறது 29 நிமிஷம் ஆயிரம் பேப்பர், if I am correct. I started noting time and then 29 minutes. And that's a paper is really rice. It was rose. In fact, rice, rose. And the topic also growth also. So vardhatam, abhivardhatam, samvardhatam. In all three words, upasarga is there. Abhivardhatam, samvardhatam, vardhatam. So three papers, really all three papers very, very informative and initiative also. So I thank Sri Vishnu Mohan Foundation, again 4 letters of the SVM. So on the Swamiji, and very nice to hear, and all three papers presented. I can bless 1 and 3 and takes blessing from the middle one person. Because he is an aged person. Because Ramayana says, first thing the Adikavi says, Jnanavardha Mayaradan Bhagavo Parjupasta is there. So those who are aged, irrespective of this, we have to salute. So in between Madhyamani Naya and P.C. Parsadi is a serious person. That's the young and energetic Madhusudhanan, the name itself. And he is having Kalaichelvan also. So Selvam, Nandraga, Varadaga, Portugal. I thank once again the authorities, particularly Swamiji, for giving me opportunity to be a chair of this person. Thank you very much.